In this video, we're going to deal with the addition and subtraction utilizing the idea of significant figures. The rule for addition and subtraction with sig figs is that we use the least number of places after the decimal. And I think you'll see what I mean when we're looking at these examples. And it's important to remember that whenever you're adding or subtracting, the units of your measurements must be the same. You can't add some number with centimeters to some number with meters. They either need to both be meters or they need to both be centimeters. We round just like we would round anything in math, which means that 5 and up rounds the number up. Anything below 5 keeps the number the same. I think you'll see what I mean when we're looking at some of these examples. The first example I have for you is 6 centimeters plus 12.1 centimeters. You'll notice here there are no places after the decimal in the first number. So I'm going to write a 0 here to remind myself there are no places after the decimal. And the number 12.1 has a number that's one place after the decimal. And so now when we're adding these together in our calculator, we would get 18.1. And if you look here at these two things, the least number of places after the decimal is 0, which means I need to round this number to 0 places after the decimal, which essentially means I need to cut the number off here so there's nothing after the decimal. I'm always going to look to the right of that line to determine rounding of the number in front of the line, and based on our rounding rule, only 5 and up will round the number up, and because that number is less than 5, we're not going to round that number up, and we're just going to cut the number off there. So our final answer then for this would be 18 centimeters. Let's take a look at the next example. In the next example we have 1.4 plus 1.19. The first number is one place after the decimal. Remember, we're looking at the decimal and figuring out how many places after the decimal the number goes. So here's our decimal. This goes 2 places after the decimal. And when I compare these two things here, the least number of places after the decimal is this one, which means my final answer needs to be only one place after the decimal. So when we add these up, we're going to get 2.59. And I want to round one place after the decimal. One place after the decimal is right there, which means that's where I want to cut off the number. And again, I'm going to look right to the right of that decimal to decide rounding. And 9 would be a number that would round that up. So my final answer then is actually 2.6. Not 2.5, but 2.6. And that's because the 9 rounded that 5 up to a 6. So there's the example to the second, or the answer to the second problem. The next one I have is 16.0 plus 2.13. Now the first number, there is one place after the decimal, it's right there. The second number is 2 places after the decimal, as you can see. And the least number out of these two things right here is 1. So that means my answer better be only one place after the decimal. When I add these up in my calculator, I get 18.13. And remember, we want to go out one place after the decimal. So that's kind of where my line is going to be, where I'm going to cut this number off. And I'm always going to look to the right of that line. Now 3 is a number that we're not going to use to round, which means I'm just going to cut that off and essentially erase everything after my line without rounding anything. So my final answer is 18.1. And just like addition, all three of those examples have been addition examples. Subtraction works the same way. 23.27 minus 12.058. If you put this in your calculator the way it is, you'll end up with the number 11.212. And now let's go ahead and deal with the sig figs. The first number has 2 places after the decimal. The second number has 3 places after the decimal. Out of these two, the 2 places after the decimal is the least number of places after the decimal. So I want to round my number to 2 places after the decimal. So that's kind of where I want to cut off the number, which means it's the 2 that's going to determine rounding. And we know that the 2 means that we're going to keep the number the same. And because we're going to keep the number the same and not round it, we're just going to go ahead and erase everything after that line. So my final answer is 11.21 for that very, very last example.